Well, hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to episode 19 of Let's Talk.
Welcome. Now, do you want to stop that share screen so we can see us? There we go. Uh, well, I have to apologize straight up before we even dive in today because I'm in Thailand and my Wi-Fi is not working. So we've had some technical glitches, but here we are.
Here we are, and again, sorry to our viewers that this is will be shown not live today due to some technical difficulties, but we hope that you will enjoy our conversation today.
Yeah. So, hello, everybody. I'm Leanne.
And I am Jason, and this is Let's Talk.
So, as usual, this is a space where no topic is off limits. We'll be discussing things from well-being to resilience, leadership, money, relationships, mindset, and so much more.
And here at Let's Talk, we bring different perspectives, real stories, definitely honest conversations, because the things we don't often talk about are the things that often that matter the most that we do need to talk about.
Yeah. And our goal here is simple. It's to spark new ideas, shift your mindsets, and give you practical tools that you can use in your life and in your leadership.
So whether you're tuning in today for inspiration, growth, or just a fresh perspective, let's talk.
Let's talk. Well, welcome to another episode in the series of the neuroscience of being human. So far, we've kind of explored how the brain shapes our behavior, how our emotions influence our performance, how our habits rewire our reality and our future, why connection really matters to us, and how bias shapes our decisions. So we've kind of been on this journey over the last few weeks. And today, what we're going to talk about is something that's deeply human again, and that is courage, or more specifically, the courage to be seen, to be visible, to show up. And for most of us, that can be terrifying because for many people, the biggest barrier to their growth isn't their lack of ability. It's actually the fear of being seen. And I know that I have experienced that. And I'm sure, Jason, you have too, as we're doing more of this live stuff. So it's a great topic for us to be communicating about today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for two of us who are recovering perfectionists, like we always love everything perfect, no glitches. But, sometimes you just have to go with the flow. And that is I guess the amazing thing of being live, right? Is you go with the flow. So
Yeah, I know that one of the things that I often say is that the show must go on, you know, and it doesn't matter what you're dealing with, you just have to step in and step up. So,
absolutely. And as also a professional performer, for a number of years singing in foreign languages. I guess in front of an English audience, if you forget your words, you can just, say some words that sound like the actual language that you're singing in, and pretty much nobody knows, right?
I
um,
love it.
yes. So I want to talk a little bit about why visibility feels threatening. And why does it trigger so much fear? Which is a great question to start off with, right? And the reason why visibility why it triggers so much fear is it because the brain links visibility to social evaluation, right? That social evaluation of being judged, of being, oh my gosh, like what are they thinking of me, etc. So for most of human history in this area, right, being accepted by a group, whether it's a group of peers, family, etc., it meant survival. Like how you're seen means my own survival. So a lot of times people will show up not their authentic selves, right? Because they want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, they want to feel valued, etc. Because sometimes showing up as your authentic self will actually put you in this very vulnerable state that might get some rejection. Um, so just know that part of that social evaluation is survival. Also, being rejected meant danger, right? Like, oh my gosh, if somebody doesn't like my idea or the way forward that I see, it could be, like I often think of like teams in organizations, right? And if you're the leader or if you're part of a senior member of the team that has an idea and you're like, oh, you know what? Like that idea is just, people are going to think it's stupid. It's because your brain is detecting survival and it's detecting danger. And we've talked in many episodes that, and I think it's what is it every 20 seconds, Leeanne, that our brain scans for safety.
Multiple times a second, actually.
Mm,
Yeah. So it's consistently, constantly scanning the environment for our safety. And it's a very primitive response because back in the day, if we were on the savannah and we weren't part of the group, it meant certain death because we'd be eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. And although we've evolved as a humanity, we're no longer dealing with saber-toothed tigers, our brain still responds in the same way, um, which is quite fascinating, really.
yeah. So, and I think that was a good lead into is, how our brain has evolved over time, right? Because it's evolved to not look for that saber-toothed tiger to come eat you, right? But it's evolved to monitor judgment, which we have all experienced, status. Where's my status in this group? Sometimes there's family status, there's work status, there's friends status. So it's monitoring to monitor judgment, status, belonging. Belonging is very important because you feel like, and sometimes we tweak ourselves in inauthentic ways to actually belong to a group. Um, so those are some of the modern day ways that are where our brain has evolved in the area of monitoring. So
Yeah.
even today, speaking up in a meeting, sharing ideas, or showing up publicly can activate that same threat system. And I'm sorry, Leanne, I think you were going to say something right as I started that sentence.
Yeah, I just wanted to double click on the status thing. We're consistently checking where do we fit in the pecking order. And the
Mm-hmm.
closer to the top we are, the more chance of survival we have, right? Because you get more resources, more opportunities, more food if we were back in the savannah. And the lower down the pecking order we are, the more risk we have of not surviving or being kicked out of not belonging. So this status thing is a really interesting one because we don't like the language of status. We kind of think that it's egoic. But
Mm-hmm.
if we don't have status, then we're definitely out. And out means certain death. So we want to have status, and the higher, the better.
Yeah, yeah. And it just brings me to think about, right, like just everything that's going on globally with, from politically to all the wars and just like now different countries like Australia is actually being involved, which you I don't think in my adult lifetime I have ever heard of Australia being involved in, even from an asylum um, point of view. But it just makes me think, like in that status category, like all these world leaders have such an ego around status, and where do they fit in the pecking order?
Yeah,
So I think that
absolutely.
status thing is very current and on display in a global way.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right because before, us showing up would have been in our local community, in our workplace, and kind of limited to that. But now that we have this global connection, our whole idea of actually showing up and being seen and having the courage to be seen is not just from my own community. It's this whole global community now that can observe what we're doing, right? So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So so I might continue talking then about fear in the survival brain. So what actually happens neurologically when we feel that fear? And we've talked about this at length over previous podcasts that when fear kicks in, or we anticipate judgment or this social status irregulation, our amygdala, the threat detector center of our brain, detects threats. So it's like this alarm system that's consistently scanning the environment, and it's like warning, 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 because it's detecting a threat. When that happens, our stress hormones activate. So cortisol, adrenaline kick into our body and prepare us for this fight, flight, freeze, or for this protection, this whole idea of self-protection. So what does self-protection look like? Well, for each individual, it can be a little bit different. Um, it can show up as things like avoidance, where we know we have to do something, but we just don't do it. We avoid it at all costs. I know I've been there. We can
Mhm.
procrastinate. I know I need to do that, but I'm just going to do the cleaning instead or something else. Like we procrastinate and choose other things over actually putting ourselves on show. It can look like over preparing. And this is where the perfectionism kind of kicks in, right? Where we prepare and then we double prepare and we triple prepare and we make sure it's perfect. But perfectionism actually doesn't exist. It's the lowest form of showing up, because if we're waiting for something to be perfect, we're never going to show up because it's never going to be perfect enough. So we tend to do this kind of silliness in our mind of needing it to be perfect, and then it never is perfect. So then we never do it, as opposed to doing it kind of imperfectly and being okay with that. And then the other part of it is also staying silent. Like we just won't say what needs to be said. We would rather remain in silence and discomfort of silence rather than the terror of showing up and saying what needs to be said. And, in our social brains, because we are biologically wired to connect to people, especially in the workplace, we're biologically wired to show up, but also to keep ourselves protected and safe. So your brain isn't trying to sabotage you, it's actually trying to protect you. But the question you need to ask yourself is this actually serving me? Like my brain creating this avoidance, procrastination, over preparing, overthinking, all of this, it feels like it's protecting me, but it's actually keeping me small, right? It's not actually doing what it needs to do. So we really have to ask ourselves, am I just sitting in a fear response right now? Or does this thing really need to be a little bit better? And more often than not, it doesn't. It's us putting in the blockers to our existence.
Yeah, and kind of as you were talking through those those that list of what it could look like, Leanne, kind of two things came to mind. One thing that came to mind was entrepreneurs, right? And getting, especially entrepreneurs who are like kind of trying to launch new ventures or new products or new services or collaborations or whatever, that I kind of like when you were talking about the avoidance, the procrastination, over preparing, it just brought to light that I think these are some of the areas where entrepreneurs who are trying to launch new stuff get stuck,
Yeah,
because they
absolutely.
want it to be perfect going out the door,
Yeah,
because of that. How am I being seen visibly, right?
yeah,
Like, is going out the door kind of three fourths? Is it going to taint my brand or the collaboration of brands that are launching whatever collaboration or initiative, right? And then what also came to mind, which I know we'll be talking more about next week in regard to the wealth brain, is when it comes to people getting their finances in order, or they may be financially struggling, of like, how am I going to get to that next level, that it's easy to avoid, it's easy to put on the back burner, um
absolutely.
because I don't want to think about it. Like, I don't want to think
Yeah.
about that I only have $500 left on my bank account.
Yeah. And
uh,
it's interesting that you brought in this idea about the entrepreneurs, Jason, because one thing I often share with my coaching clients is done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. You can always amend things, you can always polish things, you can always do things better later, but just getting something out there is better than nothing at all being out there. And what I've come to realize truthfully through the work that we do is that vulnerability is actually what connects people. So if I do something and it's imperfect and I can kind of giggle and go, oh, well, it wasn't great. It wasn't my best work, but I'm now adapting that. People actually relate to that more than this polished, shined perfection kind of thing that comes out. So it feels terrifying to not have it perfect. But the truth is, we actually connect more deeply with people when we're
Yeah.
imperfect. And I think that's something that we need to consider. Like, I know for me, if somebody, stumbles and has a bit of a laugh at themselves and tries better, I much more relate to that because I can feel that and I've seen that. Whereas if somebody shows up as too polished, too perfect, it almost puts them on a different level and there's not as much relatability. Um, so I think it's an interesting conversation around this showing up, especially for entrepreneurs who want it to be perfect before they push it out. And I know because I struggled that, I know you struggled that. Like we often have to put our perfectionist in check, right? And go, done
Absolutely.
is better than perfect. Just get it done. So it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, it makes me think about like when we were just beginning conversation about Let's Talk, right? That like July of last year, and we launched, 3 months later. We didn't have everything perfect. I mean, we had some things like our branding and our like backgrounds, and all that kind of stuff. But even those things have been tweaked along the way, as different comments and suggestions and all that come in, right? um but yeah, it's super interesting on this visibility front and just how much our inner dialogue kind of takes over and it's like no 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 and then it's like before you know it's like a whole another year has passed and it's like
Yeah,
shit, didn't get anything
yeah.
done. I mean, you know
Like all the things that I promised myself I would do, I still haven't done. And yet I've done all of this other stuff, busy work, but it may not be the work that actually gets me seen. And that's
yeah,
the part.
yeah, absolutely.
So again, I just want to reiterate that the brain isn't trying to sabotage you, it's trying to protect you. And I really want people to hear that because I think sometimes we can be so harsh on ourselves without understanding, actually, this is just my brain doing its natural thing to protect me, and I can choose differently.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think what it comes down to, right, which leads into this next section around our inner critic and self-doubt is that magical area of self-awareness. I mean, because we will all have those inner dialogues, but it's that self-awareness that I always kind of use the visual of kind of like the swirl down, right? Like if your self-awareness can catch you at least halfway down or a fourth of the way down, then you can come back up to the top. But it's when you don't have that self-awareness that it just, then it's a lot more work to like get back up here.
Totally, totally. You and I both agree on the fact that self-awareness is one of the key skills that we can have as humans, but as leaders.
Yeah,
Without it, we're fumbling our way through it. At least with self-awareness, we can see the key is not to beat yourself up.
yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Because it's easy to for your self-awareness to go, oh, look at this, and then you end up in a different tailspin because then I've got to beat myself up because I wasn't perfect or I screwed this up or whatever the case may be. So self-awareness is a big part of it. And then self-compassion, I think, has to go alongside that.
Yeah,
Um, because without the compassion to self, we're harsher on ourselves than anybody else. Like we really are.
yeah,
Um, so self-awareness and self-compassion really are the two greatest skills we can have.
yeah. And it takes, some courage to like lean into those
Yeah.
and not have your ego around like, oh, that's just fluff over here. No, it's actually the ingredients that you need to help you over here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which I know we could have a whole episode on self-awareness, which we probably will sometime in the future. Um, so next we want to talk about this area of our inner critic and self-doubt. which I always find fascinating. So, in this area, many people describe an inner voice telling them they're not ready. So, Leanne and I like to call this our itty bitty shitty committee, right? This itty bitty shitty committee is going to have all your players. I like to use the visual of like a theater
Whole committee.
committee. Like all of them are on the theater stage. And then it comes down to that self-awareness and that self-compassion and all that to say, okay, these four need to go over here on stage right because we don't need you right now. um, so just remember, we all as human beings have our itty bitty shitty committee. You're not going to be able to get rid of it. Um, there's ways to help, I think, manage it and to help it do a better job for you in assisting you. Because what this voice is often telling the brain is to prevent social risk. And, I mean, nobody likes to be in social risk, right? But that's where it's like if you can get your itty bitty shitty committee managed and those committee members off to stage right and stage left that don't need to be part of the conversation or part of whatever's going on, then you're going to be in a much better place to be less at social risk. And you're going to be able to move forward more confidently with more courage, et cetera, et cetera.
Can I just say
Yeah.
something to that? Because one of the things that I think people need to realize, Jason, is that we are not that internal voice.
Yeah.
A lot of people identify with that voice being me, and it's actually
Mm-hmm.
not us, right? It's just a protection mechanism kicking in. So creating that separation. And when you talk about the committee, like literally, there could be a whole committee of voices in there. Um, and sometimes some of them are on loudspeaker, like it's loud, right? It's loud. And to realize, hang on a second, I'm not that voice. I can observe the voice, but I'm not that. I'm not this feeling that's coming up. I can observe the feeling, but I'm actually not that. It allows us to have some freedom. And I remember years ago, I did this workshop and they talked about naming the different parts of the voice. So
Mm-hmm.
it'd be like, oh, there's whinging Willow, or there's nagging Nina, or there's, down Nora, or whatever the case may be. But actually starting to distinguish the difference between the voices in our head, because we all have it. And most people identify that that's me, but it's actually not. It's just a part of us that's trying to self protect. And we can observe that without believing that. And I think that's really useful for people to understand that you're not the voice and you're not your feelings. They're just something that show up. And if we can observe them, they will pass. It's only when we pick them up and play with it and absorb it that it becomes an issue for us.
Yeah, yeah, and I often do this work with my coaching clients actually for them to get very present with their itty bitty shitty committee because
Yeah.
what I have found that most are not.
Yeah.
No.
No, they try to suppress it. And the more they try and suppress it, the louder it gets almost. Whereas if we could acknowledge it,
Mm-hmm.
it's by acknowledging it, we're taking the onus or the enormity out of it, right? It's like, oh, there's that voice again.
Yeah.
Um, and then it becomes something separate to us. It is not us. And I think that's really is such a big part of the work that we do is
Mm-hmm.
distinguishing the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just when I've done this work, it's just amazing, like the ahas that like and the light bulbs that come on. They're like, oh wow, you know, like, you know, um Loud Lucy is on my stage way more than I need her or on the
Yeah.
stage. And so,
Yeah.
it's that also that self-awareness when they become more in tune with who their committee is and that
Yeah.
it's not them, but it's like you have to manage who is on and who is off stage.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just and it's a helpful um tool, for their toolbox that can be, that they can be help managing them during, you know, during a meeting or during a retreat, or, often, or if it's with family, right? Where you can be managing who's on and who's off, and nobody even knows that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
And also being grateful. Like one of the ways that I know for me that I found an easier way to do that is to actually say, oh, it's little Leanne here. You know what I mean? That's chucking a tantrum. Okay, what's the message you're trying to give me? Okay, you're asking me to be cautious. Thank you for the message. I've got this. So you can actually kind of have a conversation, get the gold. Like, what is it that you're trying to do? You're trying to protect, you're trying to do this. Awesome. Thank you for the message. Now I've got this.
yep.
And so you're not suppressing it, you're not ignoring it because that can feel terrorizing as well. You're actually hearing the messaging, but then you, as the adult version, the competent, strong version of you, can then take control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's useful because we want the inner voice to show up because that's part of our intuition system, but we also don't want it to rule our lives. Like I often say, our mind is a terrible, terrible master, but a wonderful servant. So if I can use my mind and it can give me a warning, but then me as the master go, okay, thank you for the warning. I'm going to behave like this. Then we're using it to our advantage as opposed to it using us. And
Yeah.
that's the difference.
Yeah. You know, and what made me think when you said it, our internal intuition system is that, you know, I'll just kind of go on a little, and then I'll come back, is, like our younger generation, right? Who just relies on technology for everything. And they don't use their internal gifts like their intuition.
Yeah.
So, like I think it's really, from a generational standpoint, I think it's kind of really up to our generation, Leanne, which is considered the sandwich generation between boomers and millennials and then Gen Z, and all that, to really help give these skills to the younger generation to like be able to tune into their self-awareness, to be able to like, what does it mean to use my intuition? What does it mean
Yeah.
to like, recognize this itty bitty shitty committee? It's like you can't use this for everything. You can use it to learn some stuff, but there are parts of being human that you have to lean into the human experience to actually get that, okay, this is what intuition is, this is what self-awareness is. And I feel that that's slowly being lost from my observation. And I really think that it's up to our generation to help, for lack of a better word, save that, and help give that to the younger generation.
Yeah, it's almost marrying technology with our internal state, right? And
Yeah.
having both of them present because one without the other isn't useful. And we
Yeah.
saw that last week when we looked at cognitive bias and the algorithms and all of that sort of stuff. If we don't have our own intuition and our own gut instinct, um, then we're swayed by the external world. So there is a inner knowing that we need to have and also use what's around us. And
Yeah.
again, wonderful master, a wonderful servant, terrible master,
Yeah.
right? Like we need to kind of navigate all of that space.
Yeah. Exactly. So to kind of close up this area that around our inner critic and self-doubt, um, some of the common fear patterns that this voice often kind of ignites within us are the questions around, well, what if I get this wrong? What are people going to think? I'm not good enough yet. And where these questions come from, these fear patterns come from, are often from past criticism. We talked a bit about that last week. Comparison. I mean, we are in a, and I think this is a negative thing of technology. And I am a big technology fan, but I think one thing technology has created is comparison, 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 especially with social media. Um, and we're almost in comparison overload almost. And which we could do a whole like a whole podcast episode on these, where these thoughts come from. And also identity narratives. Um, because when the brain stores emotional memories very strongly, um, visibility arises. The brain retrieves those old experiences, and so that's going to
Yeah,
become part of the narrative.
absolutely. And anything that we've had big emotional weight with will
Mm-hmm.
stay in our memory longer. So, we can remember things that have big emotional attachments. And it's usually because our brain has a negative bias, it's always looking for what's in the threat in order to keep us alive. These negative narratives come up very much more often than, oh, good job, you did good. So we really have to be mindful that our emotional memories are the ones that are going to keep showing up in the back of our mind, these old experiences, which may not be relative today, but the fear is based on the past experience. And we kind of look to the past to dictate our future unless you've got self awareness.
Yeah.
Um, rather than looking in the revision mirror, we've got to kind of be mindful, learn through our experiences, good, bad, and ugly, and then choose something different in the future. So we're not retrieving um, those old voices, and they don't keep coming up and controlling us.
Yeah. And I think that what you just said, Leanne, like mirrors perfectly back to, I believe it was episode 17 on the social brain.
Yeah,
Around, when we talked about social pain versus physical pain, that the
yeah.
physical pain, will last for a day or two, maybe three, right? But that social pain, um, lasts so much
Feels
longer,
stronger.
feels stronger, and it's that residue that just
Yeah,
doesn't quite fully leave. I mean, it's just, you know, like I think back about conversations that I've had with different like friends of mine, and it's like they keep rehashing. I mean, to a present experience, but it was an old emotional pain that they were dealing with that brings, it brings it to the forefront. And sometimes as the listener, right, sometimes I'm just like, let it go.
yeah, yeah. But the pull is so strong and the emotional pain was so strong, it's hard to let it go. It almost is, it's kind of embedded into our wiring and our DNA. So it takes courage to actually look at that and go, yeah, that happened in the past. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned from that. And we don't
Mm-hmm.
need to do it in the future, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've spoken to this before. A lot of people will hide those things. And in organizations, we can't have people hiding mistakes. We need to learn through our mistakes in order to not you know, redo it over and over again. But that fear comes up of shame, of I'll be on the outer, so I'm going to hide it instead of actually own it. Um, which, yeah, is another whole big conversation that we could have around showing up, right? A whole big conversation because it feels unsafe to own our mistakes. It's much easier to deny, deflect, all of these other things in order to keep us safe. But that then breaks that social connection. Um, it breaks our ability to be able to connect to ourselves and to others. So I just wanted to say that because if we keep dismissing ourselves as much as we dismiss the other stuff, um, we're not going to be able to tune into our body sensation. We're not going to be able to check in. We're not going to be able to do the work. So,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
And Leanne, just one little last thing before you dive into this next section, like around this social pain, right? What I, in my own observance, that I've seen in others, like in conversation, like when that emotional pain is coming up, or even within myself too, when that is attached to a relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, friendship, family member, etc. It seems like, I mean, I don't want to say there's different levels of emotional pain. There probably are, but it's just like I find that when it's attached to another human,
Even bigger.
it's bigger.
Yeah.
It's like almost like there's a sense of betrayal like in there that happened. And it's like, and it's that internal question that this like, well, why did that happen to me? Why did they do that to me, et cetera, et cetera? And it's always easy, and I forget which episode it was in, but it was in one of our well-being episodes, right? It's like um there's a responsibility on both individuals' parts, right? Like, I mean, I remember when you're like, lift the rug, there's, where's my responsibility in it, right? And then there's the other person's responsibility, but you can only control your own responsibility in it. But I just wanted to bring up that point that I've seen an elevated level of emotional pain when it is attributed to another human.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would agree with that because our deepest fear is I'm not enough and I won't be loved. Right. Our deepest, deepest, deepest in our core fear, that's what shows up for people. And when we're in relationship to somebody, then that fear shows up even more, right? Because all of a sudden we're putting so much weight on them. And it doesn't matter what they say or do, we take things personally because of our narrative. And they're just doing them. And yet we personalize it. And I think if we can learn to just go, oh, their way is not my way, it's all good. I don't have to personalize. I
Yeah.
don't have to make up the stories. I don't have to think, oh, what they actually meant was this. Because we do that all the time. Somebody says something and then we get into our head and we add fuel to the fire and it becomes enormous. Um, whereas in reality, they just said what they said, and I don't have to make that mean anything more than that. But we
Yeah.
are little meaning machines. We add meaning to everything as part of our biological um, safety mechanism,
Yeah.
right? So, which kind of leads very nicely into the how do we actually rewire courage now? And
Mm-hmm.
I think the first step is to really normalize the fear. We all have it. Fear is not something weird that only limits to me. Fear is a visibility or fear of visibility is a biological trait. It's not a weakness. We all suffer it. And I think when people can understand this, then that shame part drops. We can actually lean into the vulnerability a little bit and go, oh, well, I'm a bit nervous about this. And if we did that and we were open, we would realize that everybody suffers the same thing. So, no need to feel shame. This is just a human experience that we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we practice it, the better, right? Um, but in order to kind of navigate the terrain when we're in that, okay, well, fear is normal, but I still have to regulate my nervous system, which is the next point. Before courage comes, we have to have regulation. And we've got to be able to turn the dial down on all the things that are happening in our mind and our body. If you've got that heart palpitating, if your palms are getting all sweaty, like it shows up in different ways. Whatever it is for you, being able to regulate yourself through that so then you can stand in courage. And, we've given great tools around this already. Box breathing to me is the number one and the easiest and the bestest because I can do it anywhere. I don't need a particular tool. All I need to do is breathe and count. Breathe
Right.
and count. I
Totally.
can do that anywhere. And I can do it with my eyes open or my eyes closed, but breathe and count. I can do that everywhere and anywhere. So that box breathing to calm that parasympathetic nervous system, to turn down the alarm, the warning siren, can be very useful. Grounding yourself is another way. You know, literally feel your feet on the floor, your butt on the chair, like actually grounding. I personally love walking around barefoot in my home for that reason, because I've always got my feet on the ground and I can, if I choose to stand with my feet even an inch wider than I normally would, that helps me to feel even more grounded. So ground yourself. And then, slowing the moment. We talked about this actually a lot in bias, that it happens when we're under pressure and, having to make decisions quickly. But if we can slow the moment and actually slow our breathing, ground ourselves, then we can feel much more calm. And then when the body feels calm, the brain then returns to calmness as well. So it's shifting that physical state in order to manage that mental state. So I think if we can learn to regulate the nervous system as step two, um, or I actually think that should be the number one thing we learn in schools, but let's not go there because I think that could be another whole series.
Can I just put one little tidbit in there too?
Please.
If you have, and it's all right, because like you can do box breathing, like in meetings, you
Anywhere,
know,
everywhere.
anywhere, right? But one thing I was going to say is that if you're in a space where you can add a little of relaxing music too,
Yeah,
and I mean, you can find anything on YouTube. Um,
yeah.
and putting in that calm, stress relief, whatever you're feeling, to add to these grounding tools that Leeanne was talking about, it's amazing on how much more kind of deeper it lands.
Yeah,
Um, and so I just wanted to put that little tidbit in about the importance of music and how that can actually enhance the breathing and grounding, etc.
absolutely. And the other one is the sense of smell. The sense of smell cuts through our neural pathways really quickly. So if you've got an essential oil or a candle or a something, that also will take you deeper quicker because it cuts through. So I would agree with that. Thank you, Jason.
And I actually
And
did
then,
both of those today.
yeah. So we've got to normalize the fear. We've got to regulate the nervous system. The next thing that we can do is actually take small visibility steps, like tiny little steps, like the brain learns safety through exposure and repetition. We learn everything through exposure and repetition. So, you know, even if it's something really small, it might be, speak up at least once in the meeting or share a thought publicly where normally I would kind of get tongue tied, or express an idea to a group that I might not necessarily normally do, right? So just those small steps, um, small steps towards visibility will help build the muscle, and then we'll feel less exposed when we have to do bigger pieces. So take small steps. And then the last part, which I think is really important, is if we can anchor to a purpose. Purpose reduces fear. And the reason purpose reduces fear is because we're thinking about something bigger than ourselves. So normally fear comes in when we're thinking about ourselves. Well, how am I going to look? What am I doing? What is it about me? Blah, blah, blah. Like it's all about me, I. But when we actually can anchor to a purpose, to a vision, to something that's bigger than ourselves, our brain shifts from what will people think about me to, oh, what impact could this have?
Mm-hmm.
And that increases courage, right? The impact to others, where we can actually feel like we're making a difference and we're contributing and we're doing something of benefit, then shifts the focus from me to external, and that can often help. So 4 steps: understand that fear is normal, regulate yourself, really make sure you do. Take those small visibility steps in preparation for the big ones, like build the muscle, start small, and then link it to your purpose. And that will then pull you forward as opposed to you having to kind of swim up paddle, right? Or upstream.
Yeah, and this last thing about purpose, Leanne, what came to mind when you were talking about that, and I'm sure you've seen this many, many times as well, but I often see where individuals struggle with this um, when they retire
Yeah.
and going into a new phase of life of like, well, now what? Like, um, like what's my new purpose? And how am I going to be? I used to be this big C-suite executive or SVP or whatever, the status. Now what are people going to think about me? Right? Like what impact am I going to have to the world?
Yeah.
So I often find that there's a whole kind of reevaluation around one's purpose when they go through, and I've seen it probably the most when individuals go from what they've always known is full-time work and all that goes with that into the next phase of life. And it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
well, help.
Abs yeah, absolutely. Because how they've identified themselves is no longer present. And then who am I without that identity, right? I often see it also happen in empty nesting. You know, when a mother has dedicated her
Mm-hmm.
life to her kids, and then all of a sudden the kids move out, and it's like, well, now who am I? What am I? What do I do? And we can have the itty bitty shitty kick in at that point around, our worth and a whole lot of stuff. So we really do need to find a new purpose.
Yeah.
Um, and whatever that is, right? And hopefully it's not following your children to where they're moving to in other countries. It's giving them the space to leave home, but also to find something that you can lean into that gives us that sense of contribution,
Yeah.
because if we're not growing and we're not contributing, we're kind of dying, right? So we need to find something else to fill the space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I mean, we don't have kids, but I can only imagine, when it's like the last one's about to fly out of the nest, it's just like they don't need mom like they used to, or dad. And I've seen some friends who've gone through a like, because their whole identity was wrapped around their child or kids. And it just, you know,
Like that. Like
yeah,
that.
exactly. And I've also seen it where, where parents will, if they're moving to here, I'm going to move there too. It's just like, no, you got to give your kids space to like fall down and get back up and learn how to be an adult. And, not saying that they're not going to lean back into mom and dad when they need to, um, but yeah, I've observed what you said in like several friends of mine.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to be the observer, and be the compassionate listener,
Yeah.
in those situations.
Because, because their whole life, their whole identity, everything that they've that has made them feel important to date is changing,
Yeah.
right? And it's not about the kids at all. It's about how you see yourself in the world. And I remember when I went from a career to becoming a mother, I remember hitting the wall and thinking, shit, who am I now without my career and my status and my car? Like that's how I had identified myself. And my father actually said to me, he said, Leanne, you're the same soldier. It's just a different like battlefield. Like, but everything that you've learned in that role, you're going to carry into this role as
Yeah.
motherhood. And then everything I learn in this role, I'll carry into my next role. And it
Yeah.
helped me go, okay, I'm still the same person with all of that. I'm just shifting the terrain. But
Yeah.
I know that I absolutely felt that. Like I felt the tension between who am I now and leaning into this new thing called motherhood, which I mean, I loved it, but I just didn't know if I would love it. But I remember going through the suffering of my old identity versus who I am now and that kind of kerfuffle. And now that my kids are kind of growing up and they're getting ready to move out of home and they say it, I can't wait to move out of home. I feel like I've been sucker punched in the gut.
Well, right. And with you, your first two as twins, I mean, it's like
And
you got
twins.
motherhood times two, and then it'd be moving times two.
Yeah. And then I have to remind myself, actually, this was my role to make them ready to leave the house. Like, that's my role, to make them well adjusted humans that can actually stand in their own power and do that sort of stuff. But that doesn't, even though I know that logically, the emotional part kicks in. And this is where we have to regulate, right, our stuff. So we're not projecting that onto other people. So, yeah,
Yeah.
we can talk for hours about this one, but I won't.
We have several new topics, just that came from
Several.
this episode. So, before we go into our top three tips, just to kind of close out this section, is that courage isn't about the absence of fear; it's the decision to move with the fear. So I'll say that courage isn't the absence of fear; it's the decision to move along with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very, very important awareness tip to have, because sometimes we can get so just in the hamster wheel um, around it. But if we use that little reflection, it's amazing how it can take you off the hamster wheel and move you a little bit, forward in the direction that you're trying to move.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I think we're ready for our top tips.
Go for it.
Awesome. Okay. So from today's conversation at Let's Talk, courage and visibility, the biology of bravery. The top three tips that came from Leanne and I's conversation today is one, fear of visibility is rooted in survival wiring. And, you know, like we were talking, so, it's so easy to default into past emotions, past narratives, etc. And fear loves that. It's almost like a playground for it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add onto that one, Leanne.
Yeah, and I think just normalizing that this is normal. It's rooted in our survival mechanism. It's not I think one of the things that we often do is we think it's personal to us,
Oh yeah,
and it's not. All right. So just being able to understand that it is part of our wiring, it is part of survival, it is normal, and I can choose differently.
yeah, yeah. Because I think sometimes, a lot of times, people get rooted in how they used to be seen,
Yeah.
or what a former purpose was, um, and kind of in that hamster wheel, and and then it's easier and almost more comfortable to stay in that than move into something new that's unknown, of where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, this is a little risky, and how are people going to see me? Are they going to judge me? So it's almost more easy to sit in the dysfunctionalism versus powerfully moving into being comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, secondly, the brain interprets judgment as social risk. I know we talked a lot about that in today's conversation. And then, thirdly, courage grows through small, repeated actions. So it's that new wiring that's taking place. And soon that new wiring will become hardwiring, and it will be the new default. Um, so the more we can create positive experiences, with deeper levels of awareness, self compassion, um, being also a compassionate listener to others, then those more new positive defaults are going to feel better,
Yeah.
than some of the old fear based, that didn't feel so nice.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to put in here before we move into top resources?
No, I just think sometimes the reminder that we're all human beings, we're all humans having a human experience, and all of us feel fear. All
Yeah.
of us feel a lack of confidence. All of us feel this. The question is, can you feel that and move through it? Or do you get stuck? And hopefully after today, by having the awareness that others, we're all having the same things, it gives you the confidence to go, I could maybe lean into a little bit more. I can maybe do one little thing differently. Because confidence really is the breeding ground for everything good in our lives, right? If we sit with fear, we're not going to have the lives that we're hoping to have, because we're limiting our exposure, we're limiting our ability. So I just wanted to kind of double click on that. I think this one is such a big topic.
Yeah.
Um,
And what's interesting when you said that, that brought back to me, I was watching this short video on an interview with Michelle Obama, when she was talking about her mom at the end of life. And, you know, and her mom was like, wow, that went fast.
yeah,
And she was like, what went fast? She was like, life.
yeah, It does. And the older we get, the faster it gets. Anyway.
Exactly. So, yeah. So it's like, do you want to be in a hamster wheel on tip number one, or would you rather be in a hamster wheel for tip three? I think
Yeah.
personally, I'd like tip three.
Yeah. Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Which leads us to some resources that we have that really speak to this topic. The first one is The Confident Code by Katty Kay and Claire Simpson, or Shipman, I should say. And this kind of explores the science behind confidence and the strong link to risk taking and taking action and doing what we need to take. So it's a really good book to help to break down what confidence is and then rebuild it. So I think it's useful. The second one is an old favorite of mine. I've recommended it to many people over the years. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And it's not to get rid of the fear. That's not what it's about. It's about reinforcing courage as behavior um, with fear present, not in the absence of fear. So again, it's a great book. It's accessible to a broad audience, but it really helps us to understand that the fear is there, but I can still do it anyway. So I think it's a classic. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, definitely read it. And then we come back to our favourite, Dr. Brené Brown, because she's got so many books on and so many resources on this whole idea around vulnerability being the birthplace of courage. And we kind of talked about that. You know, if we can be vulnerable and truthful, it reduces shame, reduces fear, reduces the concern about judgment and visibility because highly relatable leaders and entrepreneurs are human who make mistakes too. So having this idea about sharing vulnerability and being truthful can really make a huge difference in how we show up and how others then show up. Because vulnerability is not weakness, it is the birthplace of courage. And
Mhm.
the more that we kind of hide and have that shame, the more we're being, or the less we're being vulnerable, right? So it's kind of, okay, which one do you choose? And then the last resource is a TED Talk by Susan David. And Susan David explains emotional intelligence very, very well. She's got a few good books that I've read. One is called Emotional Agility. But anyway, this TED Talk explains again the emotional avoidance that we have versus courage and leaning in.
Mhm.
And it again reinforces accepting fear rather than suppressing it or trying to get rid of it. Just accepting that it's there. It's a warning signal. Thank you. And now what do I choose anyway? So a great resource. And again, I think it's useful that we learn more of this stuff because when you understand the brain, fear then becomes something that you can work with, not something that has to stop you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. It's not about being stopped anymore. It's about this is happening and I'm choosing to be courageous anyway. So that's the top tips for today, Jason,
Yes. And as
and
always,
resources.
yes. And as always, we will put these top recommended resources in the YouTube channel that's associated with episode 19. And moving on to episode 20, which is our second to last episode in the series, which is crazy just on how fast this time has gone. Episode 20 is going to be on the wealth brain, and that money lives in the nervous system.
Yeah,
Um, I know, Leeanne, since money and finance is one of your sweet spots,
it is.
anything additional, any little nugget you want to give to folks on for this episode?
No, the only thing that I want to say is that money is one of the things that triggers the most amount of fear in people, really. Relationships break down because of it. You know, our relationship to money and where it sits in our nervous system has a big impact on how we show up in life. So being able to pull this apart a little bit and actually understand it from a different perspective, because as you said very early on in this conversation, wealth is one of the things that people will avoid at all costs because I don't understand it and it becomes overwhelming. So I'm just not even going to look at it. So
Yeah.
we're going to kind of lift the rug and look at it and actually talk about it because money matters. Um, And if we can have conversations about money without all the shame and, it's a taboo subject and we don't discuss money, like we have so much conditioning and programming about wealth, that no wonder we struggle with this in our nervous system. So I'm looking forward to the conversation next week.
Yes, and it actually happens to be during the week of St. Patrick's. So a little bit of luck in there too. So
Absolutely.
so it will be next Wednesday, Pacific Coast time, 3:30 p.m. Because of the time change, and Thursday, March 19th, still at 9:30 a.m. AED time. So with
Yeah.
that, we just have one more in this series, which will be on identity upgrades, becoming the future you. So, and then we will be announcing our new series as well. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I think we're ready for our close.
I think we are too.
So, as always, everyone, thanks for joining us today at Let's Talk on today's conversation of courage plus visibility on the biology of bravery.
Yeah, we hope it sparks something new, a new insight, a fresh perspective, or just a question that's worth exploring now. Or even just something that you're willing to lean into that you might not have been willing to lean into before.
Exactly. And as always, here at Let's Talk, our mission is simple to have the conversations that matter and to remind you, you don't have to figure out this big, complex thing called life alone. We are here to give you tips and tricks and tools for your toolbox and to have the conversations alongside you.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend, like, subscribe, do all the things because we really want you to keep the conversation going with us.
Exactly. Because when we talk,
We really talk.
and anything is possible
So let's talk.
with real conversations.
Limitless possibilities. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.